The next item of business is a debate on motion 21102 in the name of Natalie Donennis on the Children, Care Experience and Services Planning Scotland Bill at Stage 3. I'd be grateful if members who wish to take part in the debate were to press their request to speak buttons now. And I call on Natalie Donennis to speak to and move the motion. Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. We grow up loved, safe and respected so that we realise our full potential. Presiding Officer, no law can achieve such an ambition on its own, but it can create the conditions, the support and the services that make it possible. That is what the Children, Care Experience and Services Planning Scotland Bill does. I want to thank every child, young person and adult with care experience who has contributed their views, experiences and ideas to shape this bill. I know some of them are planned to be here in the gallery for the debate and many more are watching online. When Fiona Duncan agreed to lead Scotland's Independent Care Review in 2016, she set in motion the action needed to challenge, encourage and transform a system which continues to this day. Equally, I want to recognise the leadership of our former First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, whose commitment to the promise helped ensure that the findings of the Care Review were not only heard but were acted upon. Her determination to place care-experienced children and young people at the centre of national policy has been instrumental in driving this work forward and in setting the direction that we continue to build on today. I also want to thank the committed individuals and organisations across Scotland who are working tirelessly every day to implement the promise and improve lives. It has been a privilege to visit many of you, to see your work firsthand and to witness your passion and determination. This bill gives effect to the 5 foundations of the Care Review. We promised that children would be listened to and meaningfully and appropriately involved in all decisions about their care. Through this bill, children and adults with care experience will have a right to independent advocacy. We're making changes to the children's hearing system to make it more child-centred and rights-respecting, and by bringing key services within scope of the UNCRC, we're putting children's rights at the very heart of the care system. We promised that where children are safe, loved and supported in their families, they should stay. And through this bill, we're making family group decision-making more consistently available and introducing a right to request it. We're strengthening support for kinship carers, and a national register of foster carers will help protect children and ensure better matching with carers. We promised that where living with family is not possible, children should stay with their brothers and sisters where it is safe to do so and belong to a loving home for as long as they need. This bill commits to annually updating kinship care and foster care allowances, it extends continuing care to 26 and it limits the ability to make profit from the provision of children's care services. We promised that children would be supported to build and sustain relationships with the workforce and with their wider communities. We're creating a new system of aftercare, offering advice, guidance and support during the critical years, and we're strengthening corporate parenting duties. We also promised that the system itself would be responsive, that the scaffolding of support would be there when needed. And through this bill, we are promoting greater understanding of care experience. We're strengthening children's services planning and accountability. Changes to the children's hearing system will improve timescales, consistency and continuity, something that we heard very strongly from those who had experience of the hearing system. And on that, I do want to recognise the amazing work of the young people involved in Our Hearing's Our Voice. Your voices and your work has been instrumental in transforming the hearing system, and you should be so proud of the contribution that you have made to this piece of legislation. Presiding Officer, many of these measures have been shaped by members across this chamber, and I thank them for their thoughtful and constructive engagement, continuing right into Stage 3 deliberations yesterday. Our willingness to work together sends a clear message to children and young people in care and those who have been in care that this Parliament is determined to keep the promise by 2030. Now, I recognise that concerns have been raised about deliverability, and I understand those concerns, but this bill was always intended to be ambitious, because delivering the promise demands ambition from all of us. The Government is committed to working with partners to ensure that delivery is not only possible but meaningful. Now, as I'm not standing again at the election, there will be a new minister to take this work forward, so I want to take a moment to say how much this has meant to me. I have put my heart and soul into this bill. I've prioritised it above everything else, and I've worked harder on this than anything I have ever done. And I don't say that for recognition. I say it because of how deeply I care. One of the most meaningful parts of this role has been meeting young people with care experience, and I am truly grateful to every one of you who gave me your time. Those conversations kept me focused and determined. You were never afraid to challenge me. Ministers might think committee scrutiny is tough, but it's nothing compared to walking into a room full of young people with strong views on the promise. You asked the hard questions, and that mattered. Listening to your experiences of loneliness, of anxiety, distrust and struggle stayed with me. And at times I shared parts of my own story because I wanted you to know that I understood. I remember telling one group that I still feel uneasy when there's an unexpected knock at my door, because growing up, that rarely meant good news for me. I grew up in a world where distrust in services was very normal, and yet here I am, in politics, meeting senior officials, police leaders and educators. That journey has not been easy. Overcoming that distrust and the imposter syndrome that comes with it has taken time. And those feelings don't disappear. You just learn how to manage them. But this is not about me. I am deeply grateful to have been given the opportunity to lead this work, and I thank the First Minister for giving me that opportunity and for his commitment to ensuring that the promise remains a government priority. My background did not set me on a path to become a politician, let alone a government minister. But I hope that by stepping into this role, I have shown any child or young person who feels their future is hopeless, as I once did, that it is not. You have so much to give, and I am living proof of that. Do not give up. Presiding Officer, I don't have time to say everything that I would like to, so let me close once again by thanking everyone, the children and young people, the organisations, my officials, members across this chamber and everyone who has contributed to this bill. It has honestly been the honour of my life. And with that, I move that the Children Care Experience and Services Planning Scotland Bill be passed.
Thank you. I now call on Ros McCall.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I begin by thanking the Minister not only for her willingness to work across the Chamber and directly with me through the passage of this bill, but also for the words that she has just given in that speech. I think her speeches are best when they come from the heart. That constructive engagement has been genuinely appreciated, and it reflects the spirit in which this legislation should be taken forward. There can be no question of my belief in the promise. Like many across this chamber, I supported it because it represents something rare in public policy, a clear shared commitment to fundamentally change the lives of children who have too often been failed by the systems designed to protect them. It was ambitious, it was necessary, it was bold, and above all, it was urgent. Scotland made a collective vow to its care experienced children that this Parliament has a responsibility to ensure that that vow is kept. But make no mistake, this bill is not the promise. It doesn't come close. But on behalf of the Scottish Conservatives, I can confirm that we will vote in favour of this bill at decision time this evening. But I want to be honest with the Chamber about what that support means and what it demands. Right from the initial evidence session, I asked about the deliverability of the bill. Throughout stages 1, stage 2 and now stage 3, concerns have been consistently incredibly raised by those on the front line. Social Work Scotland has warned that without meaningful investment in workforce capacity, the bill's ambitions simply cannot be realised. COSLA has been clear that local authorities are already under immense pressure and that new duties without adequate funding risk stretching services even further. And the Law Society of Scotland has raised serious questions about the legal clarity and practical applications of key provisions. Now, these are not fringe voices. These are the very organisations we rely upon to deliver change. They are the people who will be asked to implement every clause of this legislation and to resource every new duty. And when they tell us the foundations are not strong enough, we have a duty to listen. And the Scottish Government has a duty to respond with action. Social Work Scotland, those who see the consequences of this system every single day, have taken the extraordinary and reluctant step of urging Parliament to reject the bill. They do so with what they themselves describe as a deep regret and disappointment. They remind us of something that we should all reflect on, that the care system is already cluttered, complex and does not provide a clear frame to support children, families, decision makers and service providers. We do not take those words lightly. Supporting this bill doesn't mean we can dismiss them. The Law Society of Scotland has warned that the bill does not fully meet recognised human rights standards or provide the legal clarity and consistency required in Scotland's child and family law landscape. Presiding Officer, that's not a minor technical critique. That's a fundamental warning. We should not pass legislation that the legal professionals tell us falls short of the human rights standards we are obligated to uphold. And COSLA has been unambiguous. Local authorities are already under immense pressure, and imposing new duties without adequate funding doesn't help care-experienced children. It risks making the system worse for them. The Scottish Government cannot pass this bill and then walk away from the funding question. That is not progress, that is pressure dressed up as policy. We are supporting this bill because we believe in what it could achieve. But the Scottish Government must understand that passing legislation is not the same as delivering change. The workforce must be resourced. The funding must be real. The legal clarity must be provided. Without these things, the bill will not keep the promise. It will become another layer of complexity in a system already struggling under the weight of good intentions that were never properly implemented. Voting for this bill today is a vote for the promise, but only if the Scottish Government treats what comes next with the seriousness these warnings demand. Implementation, resourcing and accountability are not afterthoughts. They are the whole point. This Parliament must not simply pass a bill and then consider its work done. Scrutiny does not end at stage 3. We will be watching and asking the hard questions about whether the investment is real, whether the workforce is supported and whether the children this bill is meant to protect are actually better off. The 2030 deadline set by the promise is not a comfort. It is a countdown. And with these warnings we have heard from Social Work Scotland, COSLA and the Law Society, the clock is ticking, louder than ever. Further reform, sustained investment and an unrelenting focus on outcomes are not optional extras. They are what the promise requires. For care-experienced young people and families, what matters is not what we pass in this chamber, it's what it changes in their lives. Too many of them have lived through the gap between policy and reality, between what the system promised and what is actually delivered. This bill on its own does not guarantee change. What it does is create an obligation, and we intend to hold the Scottish Government to it. Today, the Scottish Conservatives will vote in favour of the bill, not because it's sufficient, but because the children it is meant to serve cannot afford for us to stand still. Our support is not a green light for complacency, it is a demand for delivery. If we stand here in 2030 and say hand on heart that we have kept the promise, then today is not the finish line. It is the moment the Scottish Government's accountability begins.
Thank you. I now call on Martin Whitfield.
I'm very grateful, Presiding Officer, and I remind the Chamber of my register of interests. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak in this debate and on behalf of Scottish Labour, because I think during last night's proceedings it was striking to see a significant level of agreement in relation to Stage 3 amendments. And I think this demonstrates 3 things. First, that there has been much improved engagement from the Minister and the Government to deliver on issues that will raise both myself but other colleagues across this chamber at Stage 2, and I am very grateful for that. And second, that there is still an encouraging level of consensus and commitment across this chamber towards fulfilling the promise. And thirdly, that there are many people across Scotland, both within the care-experienced community and those who support them, that want to see change. Unfortunately, the fact is that improved engagement was an absolute necessity, because engagement during the early stages of this bill's development and before the bill came before the Chamber has been extremely poor. The people with the most experience and knowledge to contribute to this bill were not all listened to, and it is much a poorer piece of legislation for that. It should have not been left to the last moment. It is far, far too important. The Independent Care Review told us in 2020 legislation was needed to simplify the legal landscape. This government promised us in 2022 that this would happen. And this bill is a lot of things, but simple it's not. Unfortunately, further legislation will be required in the next session to clear up the messy legislative landscape, as well as to properly redesign the children's hearing system. And we must learn the lessons that this process has taught us as politicians within this Parliament and within the government. I am proud, however, that we did manage to reach a point where this bill starts to make real, tangible differences to the lives of one of the most vulnerable groups in our country. It introduces the right to return to care, and in particularly that itself is a worthy celebration. This bill has provided an opportunity to shine a light on incredibly important work that the independent advocacy services do. Young people have the right to have their voices heard under Article 12 of UNCRC, which must always guide our policy making. And independent advocacy empowers them to do so. And during these proceedings, I've sought to highlight the need for the UNCRC to guide our legislation, to reimagine the approach to children's hearings, to acknowledge the vital contribution, immense value of foster carers. The provisions in this bill, the discussions surrounding them, must provide an impetus to act on these issues. Because that's what this bill actually is. It is an impetus to act. It is an instruction to act. It is a call to capture the voice of our young people to act. It does not fulfil commitments to the care experience community. Presiding Officer, we're still not where we need to be. Corporate parenting, social workers still operating in incredibly challenging environments. Too many care experienced young people are still not being given the nurture that they need to thrive. And the hard-won victories in this bill will mean nothing if there is not proper resource and effective implementation. I do wish in the short time that's left to genuinely comment on a minister who I think, as she leaves this place, is probably at her most valuable. She has crafted a way of reaching out through the stage 2 and stage 3 of this bill that I think many with far more experience could deeply learn from. And I hope whoever follows her builds on that, doesn't start again, doesn't need to learn to get again, but to look at what she's achieved. And I know in discussions that I've had, and indeed the Minister mentioned in her own contribution, a concern about imposter syndrome. From my own point of view, she absolutely should not think that. She is not an imposter in any way. She is a highly skilled, articulate politician that has defended the Scottish Government, has listened to care experienced people, has listened to sometimes buffooning politicians around this chamber, but has done everything she could do to get this bill into a place. And I confirm that Scottish Labour will support this bill tonight, and I thank her specifically for that work. My apologies, not through the Chair, Presiding Officer. Because 6 years ago, parties across this Parliament came together to make a promise. We now need to build on this consensus. We must keep being ambitious, but most of all, we must keep remaining accountable for where we're falling short to the people who really matter here, and that is our care experience community. I'm grateful, Presiding Officer.
Thank you. I now call Ross Greer.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I start by paying tribute to Scotland's care experience community? We would not be here today without the incredibly powerful political movement that they built, a movement that was ultimately impossible for politicians in parliaments and governments at all levels to ignore. That is the only reason that we are here today to pass this bill. And the bill is not everything that our care experience community deserve. Absolutely not. But it makes huge progress. We will need to return to this next session. There will need to be at least one more bill next session. As members have already highlighted, child law in general in Scotland is now pretty hopelessly fragmented. At the very least, we are going to need a consolidation of the great many acts that this Parliament and indeed the Westminster Parliament before this place passed. And I'm still frustrated that the review of legislation in relation to the care system in particular is only going to come after this bill, when this could have been an opportunity to make a great many of the obvious changes that I think that will conclude. But nonetheless, the Scottish Greens are proud to support this. This is a stronger bill for the work of this Parliament. It establishes the right to independent advocacy. That is huge progress. And I'm glad that we succeeded in defining what that actually meant through the amendments that I lodged at stage 2 and those from Nicola Sturgeon and the Minister at stage 3. It is a far more operable and far more effective definition, I believe, that we have. And yesterday, we added non-instructed advocacy for children's hearings. It cannot be right that children who, for reasons of age or incapacity, can't say for themselves are at risk of missing out on advocacy in that most critical of settings. Ministers will now, once we publish this, have to publish corporate guidance, corporate parenting guidance. And that guidance is going to need to include information on the provision of training and the renewable training. That sounds pretty dry, but it's actually incredibly important when we think of the critical role that councillors will play in actually delivering the promise, as the leaders of local government, as those with that direct responsibility for looking after so many children in our society. I think we can all acknowledge that we came to a relatively untidy solution on UNCRC compliance, but it was the right solution. Everything we do now in this Parliament must be underpinned by and compliant with the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, and I'm glad that we came to the decisions that we did on that. I want to thank the Minister for the work that she's done throughout this process in agreeing to take forward work looking at the situation of estranged young people across Scotland. Not all estranged young people are care experienced. In fact, many find themselves in the first moments of adulthood almost totally ineligible for any form of support, or even unaware of what support they can access. And at this point, I want to pay tribute to Councillor Blair Anderson. As I said yesterday, there are no organisations left in Scotland now who are dedicated to representing the estranged community. It is just Blair Anderson. But it's as a result of the work that he's done that we have this commitment from the government to take this forward. And this must be on the agenda in the next session of Parliament. Just before I close, Presiding Officer, I want to thank the Minister not just for her work and her willingness to collaborate on this bill, but on all of the work that we've taken forward together throughout her portfolio. There is no doubt how deeply she believes in this mission to make Scotland the best place in the world for children and young people to grow up. And I wish her and her family well in whatever she chooses to do next after she leaves this place. I also want to thank Nicola Sturgeon for her leadership, not just on this cause, but on so many causes that are core to what so many of us believe this country can be. I still think that being the then Deputy First Minister's temporary bag carrier in 2014 was possibly the most nerve-wracking job I've ever had or will ever have. But I am so grateful for everything that Nicola Sturgeon has given to Scotland, but in particular everything that she has given to our care experience community and the impact that that has had for them. In closing, Presiding Officer, this bill is one more step towards meeting the promise to Scotland's care experience community. It's an opportunity for us as a Parliament to prove that love is a verb. We, above all others, have a duty to show love to Scotland's children and young people. And for far, far too long, the state failed to show that love to care experienced children and young people. The last 13 years have been a journey to make amends for that. Today is just one more step on that journey, far from the final step, but it is an important step, and for that reason the Scottish Greens will be proud to vote for this bill today.
Thank you. I now call Willie Rennie.
This is probably the most difficult job in government. The promise encapsulates everything that government does. It reaches in every single corner. So to be a junior minister in charge of that enormous responsibility was just a gigantic task. And I have seen the Minister grow in strength and authority as that bill has progressed. I think she has become an outstanding Minister. I know she doubts herself, but she shouldn't doubt herself, because I think she has really risen to the challenge and navigated what was a really difficult bill to something that is in a decent shape now. And I want to thank her for that. She also had the former First Minister breathing down her neck through that process. And I want to take the opportunity to pay tribute to Nicola Sturgeon too for her commitment to the promise. I think she came to her own in the pandemic. And I know I've probably tested her patience at times. She did call me a pathetic attention seeker at one point. What she didn't know is I've got 3 older sisters, and it was probably the only time ever that they've agreed with Nicola Sturgeon. But I do want to compliment her on her time in Parliament and in Government, and I wish her well in the future. Also to thank the officials. I know it's been a difficult process, but they have been resilient through that, and I've appreciated the advice that they have provided. To the care-experienced community and all the various groups who have provided excellent support and guidance. They don't always agree with each other, which is fantastic, because it gives a great 1,000 flowers will bloom through that process. We are able to learn from you, and I think have developed, as a result, a bill that is commendable. And I recommit myself and the Liberal Democrats to the promise, because I know it's important to say that. It's important for people to hear that we're not going cold on the promise, and we will stay resolute to it. This bill on its own will not deliver the promise, but it will help on independent advocacy, the children's hearing system, aftercare, the right to return, kinship, foster carer. And there are 3 important areas that I am particularly pleased about, which came through on amendments, which were places of safety as an alternative to a police station, the family group decision-making, and I'm really grateful to Children's First for the support and guidance on that, but also to Duncan Dunlop for the register of premature deaths, which is not everything that he wanted, but I think is a step in the right direction. So it's a good bill. But there is a real warning for us here, because all these fine ambitions and good intentions will not matter a jot unless we deliver. And the warning from COSLA and social workers is stark. We heard evidence from them in the committee. They were very clear. They are stretched to breaking point. And if we load an awful lot more responsibilities on them, we shouldn't be surprised that the system will be under more strain. So we need to follow this bill with the resource and the experienced people to deliver it. Because too often I see a system that is run on a crisis basis. It's only able to respond when a child is in crisis. And when they're in crisis, it's almost too late. It's never too late, but it's almost too late. And we cannot afford for that to continue, because we cannot fail. We've got 2 choices about the future, haven't we, for the young people. We can carry on as we are with failed demand on services and lives that are limited and sometimes tragically lost. Or we can draw on the amazing talents of these young people and adults who are amazingly resilient, because they have been through so much that they could contribute so greatly to our society. Those are the choices we've got. Do we want them to contribute and be great people, or do we want that lives limited and lost? That's why we cannot afford to fail. We absolutely must deliver the promise.
Thank you. We move to the open debate, and I call Nicola Sturgeon.
Presiding Officer, this will be my final contribution in this Parliament, so do forgive me if I get a bit emotional. It does feel fitting, fated even, that I am making this final speech on an issue as close to my heart as the promise is and always will be. I am, of course, one of the few remaining 1999ers, those of us who are almost literally in with the bricks of this place, which means I have been here for 27 years. That is almost exactly half my life. So even though the time is right to move on, I won't pretend that leaving isn't a wrench. It is. I want today to say a heartfelt thank you to those whose support has meant so much, to MSP colleagues, past and present, to the staff who work so hard behind the scenes here, from catering to cleaning and security, the mailroom and IT, clerks and the official report. You truly are the unsung heroes of this place. To my own staff who have worked with me here and in the constituency. And of course to my constituents in Glasgow South Side, the best constituency in the country, bar none. Thank you for the incredible honour of representing you. You know, when I look back across the last 27 years, in opposition and in government, through all the triumphs and, yes, the occasional disasters, the thread running through everything I have sought to champion and achieve is this: equality. Equality for my country, hence my passionate belief that Scotland should be and will be independent. And equality for everyone in it. Each of us, regardless of background, class, gender, sexuality, ethnicity, should have the same chances in life. What we then do with those chances is, of course, up to us, but the circumstances of our births should not place limits on what we can achieve. I believe we have made progress towards this over my time here, though the global moment we live in is warning us that it can't be taken for granted. The arc of history may be long, but I have never believed that it automatically bends towards justice. It must always be pushed that way. And it was a group of care-experienced children who 10 years ago reminded me of that and persuaded me of this: that no matter how much progress we make in other ways, Scotland will not be a fair and equal country until those who spend their childhoods in care enjoy the same support, stability and love. And let me underline that word, love, that most of us get from our parents and families. For as long as those with care experience are more likely than the rest of us, through no fault of theirs, to end up homeless, incarcerated, addicted or dead, Scotland will have no right to claim the mantle of equality. Changing that is what the promise is all about. This bill represents, in the words of Who Cares Scotland today, an incredible step in the right direction. And that is in no small measure down to the hard work and the dedication of the Minister, Natalie Dawn-Innes. As she also prepares to step down, she should feel extremely proud of what she has achieved. I know I am very, very proud of her. She has stewarded this bill with diligence, with care and with skill. And I echo what everyone before me has said today. She should never, ever doubt herself. She is a first-class minister and this Parliament will be poorer without her. Presiding Officer, the promise must be kept by 2030, and I believe it can be. But it will require a monumental effort from the next government and the next Parliament. Commitment, courage, investment and a ruthless determination to put the lives of children ahead of the established practices of the systems they rely on. I may have been the First Minister who made the promise, but let me say this: the real place in history will belong to the First Minister who keeps the promise. I hope with all my heart that will be my friend John Swinney. But whoever it is, do not fail these children. If you pick up this baton and run towards the finish line with every ounce of your energy, you will hear me cheering you on. But if you don't, be in no doubt, you will definitely hear from me then. Presiding Officer, I do have an eye on the clock, but I hope you might indulge me for just a moment longer. Over my years here, I have seen politics and political discourse change almost beyond recognition, and not always for the better. This is true globally, but Scotland is not immune. And yes, I know that I bear my share of responsibility. This session of Parliament has been the most fractious and divided that I have served in. But the last couple of weeks have reminded us, through our consideration of the assisted dying legislation and now this bill, that it doesn't have to be that way. So let me offer some parting thoughts. And since I haven't always lived by these principles, I should probably frame it as advice to my younger self rather than to those who will come after me. But either way, here it is. Make friends in other parties. Opponents need not be enemies. And on that note, can I thank one of my good friends from another party, Ross Greer, who has given up some of his speaking time for me here today. So reach across the aisle. And no matter the depth of your loyalty to your own political tribe, don't forget to think for yourself. Keep a sense of perspective. You know, if everything is a scandal or an outrage, nothing is. And then those who deserve to be held to account, they get off scot-free. Even when trying to bring your opponent down in debate, elevate this institution. This Parliament was hard fought for, and it will outlive all of us. But there are those in the ascendancy in politics today who don't want that to be so. So do not take this Parliament for granted. Don't live life on social media. Use it, but never forget that there is a real world out there, and it is the people in it that you are here to serve. And finally, every day you walk through these doors and into this magnificent chamber, remember that it is a privilege, a rare privilege. For 27 years, it has been my privilege, one that I must now draw to a close. So let me do so by urging everyone here today to vote for this bill, for the sake of the children who rely on the state, who rely on us to look after them. But, Presiding Officer, I want the very, very final words I utter in this chamber to be for those children and to those who will occupy these benches in just a few weeks' time. And these words are simply this: keep the promise.
Thank you. Thank you. And I now call on Jeremy Balfour.
Follow that, Presiding Officer. Can I thank the former First Minister for her words? I'm not sure there's lots of things that we agree on politically, but I think her advice to her younger self is excellent advice. I had the privilege of being a lobbyist 26 years ago to this Parliament, and I can see the difference the Parliament has been in the last 26 years. Some of it has been very positive, but I absolutely agree with Nicola Sturgeon that the way that we conduct ourselves sometimes in this chamber is not the way that the Scottish people would want us to do it. And I also want to say that I think we are only here today with this bill because of the work that she has done. And I want to put my thanks to her on behalf of the many young people that I have engaged with over this bill, to thank her for getting us there. Can I also thank the charities and different groups that have contacted me and spoken to me and helped me with the amendments that I brought forward last night. I think we are still in a good place with cross-party support. And I do hope that whoever forms the next government and whichever parties are represented in the next Parliament, that will continue and will hold together. I think there's some really good things in this bill. I think the movement on kinship care particularly is something that I am pleased, and I thank the Minister for the work that she has done on this. But in the time that I have left, Deputy Presiding Officer, I would like to just ask 3 simple questions about where we are and about this bill. The first is, and I agree absolutely, which again must be not often happen, with Ross Greer in regard to the issue around UNCHR. I do hope that it is compliant. We have had warnings both from the Law Society of Scotland and from a number of other charities that they do question, even with the amendments that we have brought forward yesterday, that we are competent. And I do fear that there will be a legal challenge to this bill by somebody. Clearly, it will take better legal minds than I have to decide on that. But I do hope that whatever challenge does come, that we can build on this bill, and whatever challenges the court brings back to the next Parliament, that it can be dealt with quickly. My second question is, can this be delivered in practice? I welcomed the comments made by the Minister in her opening statement and comments made by others already in regard to this. But we do have to listen very carefully to those who have given us briefing papers and warnings on this, whether it's the social workers, whether it's COSLA, whether it's others, that said that this will not work unless we fund local services better. And again, that's not something that this Parliament can do, this government can do. It will be a challenge for the next government and for the next Parliament. But if we are truly going to have hearings that work, if we're truly going to have the right intervention at the right time, if we're truly going to support grandparents, uncles, aunties, others to do the kinship care, then it does need to be funded. And I hope that that will happen. And then finally, Deputy Presiding Officer, my question is, what comes next? I also want to join other colleagues in thanking the Minister for her work that she has done on Stage 2 and Stage 3. I think, if I'm honest, the reason she is such a good Minister is that we gave her a hard time as convener on the Social Justice Committee when she first arrived in this Parliament. But she has grown in her role as a leader, and she has taken this bill through in a way that I think many others, as someone else said, could learn lessons from. But my worry is, if I am honest, with the Minister going, with the former First Minister leaving, with who knows will be elected next time, who will pick up the challenge after May? And I hope not only that the present First Minister and Mr Rennie and Mr Greer, but those from the Labour Party and from the Conservative Party, those other two leaders, will also commit, in the same way as those three leaders have committed, that whoever forms this government, that we will see the promise delivered in 2030. Because this bill, if I'm honest, will not be the paper that it's worth written on unless we do that, not just this Parliament, but civic society as a whole. So I do hope that this will be delivered. I think it is the first step, and I look forward to seeing what bill comes forward in the next Parliament. And I'm sure we will all get behind whoever is leading it, so that it will be delivered. And most importantly, some of the most vulnerable children in our society will get a better chance than we have today. Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Mr Balfour. We move to closing speeches. I call first Paul O'Kane, around 4 minutes. Mr O'Kane.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. And in beginning this evening, I will, for the last time in this Parliament, probably declare an interest that my husband is a Children's Family Social Work Manager and a registered social worker. And in beginning to sum up today's debate on behalf of Scottish Labour, I'd like to put on record my thanks to everyone involved in the bill process, but in a particular way to my colleague Martin Whitfield for something of a marathon last night on the front bench in pursuing amendments, as with colleagues across the chamber and indeed the Minister and all of the relevant officials. I've said many times in the process of this bill that it is both an opportunity and has at times been a risk. And I think we all are reflecting on that this evening. It was this government, as we've heard, that brought together the care review and made the promise. And Parliament agreed with that promise, and together we do hold it. But we do have to reflect that it is the government of the day who have the power, set the direction and drive the change. And that will be true for whoever forms the next Scottish Government in terms of the progress we make. Because as we've heard from several speakers this evening, this bill doesn't deliver the promise. And we still have so much to do. But I do want to recognise, as others have, what the bill does do. I recognise the progress that we will make on many areas by passing this legislation, particularly on advocacy, on the right to return to care, on UNCRC issues, on kinship care, and I would recognise the contributions that have been made by many colleagues in that regard. But again, I do think we have to reflect the reservations that have been outlined by the social work profession, by COSLA, by the Law Society, and indeed the reservations that have been raised throughout the process by care experienced people and many others about what more we have to do in order to move forward to achieving the promise. I would join colleagues tonight in paying a warm tribute to Natalie Dawn-Innes. She inherited the promise and the bill process as a minister, and I believe her very, very much when she speaks on how much this has meant to her and how important it has been to her. And I saw that through the interactions we had on the cross-party group on care leavers, where Natalie Dawn was absolutely willing to sit there and front up and answer questions of those young people and take the time, crucially, in a very busy ministerial diary to spend with me many an evening in this Parliament engaging with those care experienced people. And I just think it speaks to the effort she has put in. I also am going round the doors in Bridge of Weir and Houston soliciting for votes, and many folk speak to me about the respect they have and the work that she has done locally. So I am perhaps grateful that she is not a candidate against me in that election, and I do wish her all the very best for the future. Of course, we are reflecting on the conclusion of this Parliament tonight and the next Parliament to come. And I do think it is incumbent on all of us to reflect, whether we return here or not, that the biggest danger in the whole process around both this bill and more widely would be that any young person, any care experienced person feels that a promise was made and that people did what they could and then had to move on or moved on, and the promise remained undelivered. Because I think fundamentally, for too many people, and this was what was at the heart of the care review, that has been the pattern and the story of their experience, and is what they are seeking to fundamentally change. So that should weigh on all of us, whether we return to the next Parliament or not. We have so much more to do. We will need more legislation. We will need more energy and dedication. But like others tonight, I recommit myself and my party to the promise and to ensuring that we drive forward to its delivery. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr O'Kane. I now call Miles Briggs. Around 5 minutes. Mr Briggs.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I didn't realise you were coming to me straight away, but can I also take this opportunity to pay tribute to the Minister? It's a strange fact that it seems to be only at the end of a Parliament that any of us are able to actually express our respect or friendship for each other. And the First Minister, I thought, was about to make an intervention there. But I do want to pay tribute to Natalie Dawn-Innes, who, as has already been mentioned, as convener of the Social Justice Social Security Committee, did a great job as convener. But as Minister, should also be proud of the work that she has done and the example that she has set. And we often in this chamber talk about lived experience, and sometimes that's thrown around as evidence and evidential proof of what we're trying to achieve. But I know the Minister personally has brought that to her role. I think that's really important, especially for kinship care. And it's one of the aspects of the bill which I know many of us don't feel is where it should be. But I know the Minister has set on course actions and work which will make sure that that is taken forward. Now, other members have already touched upon the fact that this isn't the complete promise. This isn't us able to stand up to say that we have collectively kept the promise. But we need to dedicate ourselves to do that in the next session of Parliament. Because for all the young people watching or listening to this debate, they should know that they have been the ones who have driven the change and have made every politician from every political party represented here in our Parliament and in this chamber commit to keeping the promise and making it a reality. And I've been inspired by every single young person that I have met during my time working on this bill, from a young man I met who told me he was studying law and then joked just what Scotland needs, more lawyers, but he has seen how this has made a difference already for him to go into study. To the two sisters, which Paul McClellan and I met at an event here in Parliament with the Education and Young People's Committee, who demonstrated that keeping siblings together is something that Parliament has demanded, and we are now seeing welcome progress. Now, I think there's a lot more we should and must do to make sure that this bill achieves what it has to, and as I've touched upon, kinship care is one of the areas I really think is important. I met with some kinship care families this morning, and I still have my concerns around what we are seeing and the postcode lottery at the end of the day, which is what we all want to see addressed. And I think it's unacceptable that we still see in many local authority areas a huge variation in what is being delivered for care experienced young people. And from support stopping at 16 or 18 to not actually making sure that support goes up to 21, as is in the case for foster care. So I think we can see and must see a far better vision for kinship carers, and especially for families who, in the last committee, and again, the Minister and I sat in a round table with kinship care families, and is a story which always I repeat and sticks with me as one of the main things doing this job, which has made me think we can always do better. And it was a grandparent who told us that at 3 in the morning, the police arrived at her door with her half-naked grandchild, handed her over, and that was it. She had to then put together a package, leave her job, and make sure that she was able to rally around and get the support she needed. She fought for absolutely everything, and it shouldn't be like that. And I hope that the opportunity, and the Minister has outlined to me the kinship care vision, awareness and visibility of support, and some of the changes the government intends to take forward, especially around clearer support, local support offers, proactive information, and improving consistency and transparency. And I think these can make the difference. But if they do not, I certainly hope and intend to make sure that the next bill in this Parliament does do more for kinship care families. It's the only way that we can make sure that they will be supported. Presiding Officer, we can pass legislation, but changing attitudes is what we need to make sure happens. And I do think the promise can look towards what that has done. I've chaired and been involved in many meetings in the past few years with people working in social work, people working across our public sector who talk about the promise and talk about their ambitions to meet the promise. It comes down to resources, and it always will. But being collectively committed to keeping the promise is something I know that they certainly hold. Now, we cannot just put to one side the concerns which have been expressed by COSLA, Solace and others, that when it comes down to delivering this on the ground, that will now be the major challenge of the next session. But tonight, I hope that Parliament can and will reaffirm our support to deliver the promise. And I hope that every care experienced young people, again watching or listening to this debate, will see that their Parliament continues to work to progress towards delivering the promise by 2030. I know there is frustration at the lack of progress in many areas, and indeed on delivery on the ground and reforms. But above all, this is something we are all committed to. And I hope we can send out a clear message to care experienced young people, that we care about them, and that we will make sure that by 2030 the promise is delivered. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Briggs. Now, Colin Jones-Swinney, to wind up the debate, First Minister, a reasonably generous 6 minutes.
President Officer, before Parliament votes tonight, I want to reflect on what this moment represents for Parliament and for care experienced young people in Scotland. Throughout this debate, we have spoken about systems and about reform, but at its heart, this bill is about people. about children and young people whose lives have been shaped by the care system and about our responsibility to do better for them. The promise asked Scotland to look honestly at the experiences of those who have grown up in care. It asked us to listen to their stories of resilience and courage, but also stories of systems that too often failed to provide the love, stability and support that every child deserves and needs in their life. On Tuesday, I met with the Minister with a number of care-experienced people that I first met 10 years ago. One of those present told me that when you cannot rely on your parents to care, you need your nation to care. And that is a challenge that rests on all of us. Those young people also told me of tangible change that we have seen over the years since the promise was made. And they told me that in their opinion our nation cares more than it has in the past. That is welcome, but it is a challenge that we must always strive to live up to improve the experience of children who experience care. The promise asked us to change. Members across this chamber accepted that challenge, and today we take another seismic step in honouring that commitment. Keeping the promise is not a single bill. Ros McCall is absolutely correct on this point. It is a generational commitment, however, to transform how Scotland supports children and families. The world is watching the progress that Scotland is making, but more importantly, our children and young people are watching this Parliament and the steps that it has taken. And moments like this matter. They show that Scotland is prepared to listen, to learn and to change, to face up to uncomfortable elements of our country's identity and to make things better for those that we need to make our country better for. They show that the voices of people with lived experience can shape the laws of this country. That is what is happening tonight. And they remind us why the work that we do in this chamber matters to improve the lives of individuals in our country. So, Presiding Officer, I believe this bill represents real progress and a clear statement of the direction that Scotland has chosen to take. But it would not have reached this point in the shape that it has reached without the leadership of Natalie Dawn-Innes in steering this bill through Parliament. Since her election to this Parliament, Natalie Dawn-Innes has spoken openly about her own experiences of growing up that drove her commitment to this legislation. It is clear in everything she says and does as one of my ministers. She can be proud of the progress that she has delivered in government, and I am immensely proud of how she has gone about doing this and about improving the lives of others as a consequence. She has listened, engaged and reflected. That approach has made this government better and it's made this legislation stronger. I associate myself with what Mr Whitfield said about the learning that perhaps more experienced hands can take from more junior hands on these questions. But I also want to express my thanks to members of all parties for the commitment they have given to enhancing this bill as a consequence of the engagement they have had with the Minister. And that has been the foundation of making this bill as strong as it is, because the Minister has led a process of engagement with all parties to make sure that this bill is as strong as it can be. I know that her role as a Minister is one that has commanded her personal engagement and investment and activity, and it is rooted in the entire being of my Minister, Natalie Dawn-Innes. And I don't often disclose to Parliament the private conversations I have with my ministers, but I want to make it clear to Parliament tonight that Natalie Dawn-Innes's decision to stand down from Parliament is one that I deeply regret, and I worked very hard to try to make sure she did not take. But tonight, I want to express in the most public way I can my admiration for Natalie Dawn-Innes, for all that she has contributed to the work of my government and this Parliament, and she stands down from Parliament with my warmest wishes and my admiration for all that she has achieved. And, Presiding Officer, I also want to pay tribute to my friend and colleague Nicola Sturgeon, making her final contribution to debate in the Scottish Parliament this evening. Although there is a First Minister's question time next Wednesday, which she may decide to hold somebody to account at. There is always fear left in every week of the parliamentary session. Nicola Sturgeon and I have travelled far together since our earliest days in the Scottish National Party, and we became members of the Scottish Parliament on the same day, and we entered government on the same day. I was proud and honoured to serve for every minute of my time as her Deputy First Minister. The decisions she took as First Minister have transformed the lives of people in Scotland, in particular our children and young people. She led from the front with her bold decision to introduce the Scottish Child Payment. As First Minister, she expanded free early learning and childcare, extended free school meals and introduced the baby box. But I know that the policy she feels most proud of and most passionate about is the promise. When Nicola Sturgeon and I started on this journey of engaging on the issues of care when I was her Education Secretary, we started by listening carefully to the voices at the heart of the Independent Care Review, which called for a system focused on love, safety and respect. I took part in a number of meetings, but Nicola Sturgeon gave a commitment to speak to 1,000 care-experienced young people in Scotland, and she spoke to 1,000 care-experienced young people, and more than likely more than the 1,000. As the First Minister who made the promise, I know that Nicola Sturgeon feels a particular responsibility to see that it is fully honoured. That is a responsibility she has discharged in how she is engaged on this bill. And I know that the responsibility that she feels to care-experienced children to ensure that everyone grows up feeling loved, safe and respected will not end when she leaves this Parliament. And looking forward to her continuing contribution to this effort, I want to express, as First Minister, on behalf of the people of Scotland, my warmest thanks to Nicola Sturgeon for the immense public service she has given to Scotland as a member of the Scottish Parliament, as the Deputy First Minister and as the longest-serving and first female First Minister of Scotland. She has much to be proud of and steps down from Parliament with my heartfelt thanks and warmest wishes for all that lies ahead and for all that she has done for Scotland. You have, Presiding Officer, been very generous in the allocation of time to me this evening, and I will not speak for much longer. But there is one more important thing I need to say to Parliament. I am, of course, as we all are, about to embark on an election campaign, and although it will not be a universally popular concept around the whole of Parliament, I do intend to work very hard to try to be the First Minister that returns here after the election on the 7th of May. Should I have that privilege, I want to say openly to Parliament tonight, to the country, to care-experienced young people in Scotland, and to Nicola Sturgeon, who did so much to pave the way to enhance the lives of care-experienced young people, that if I am fortunate enough to be elected as the First Minister of Scotland to continue this work, I will do my all to deliver the promise. We entered into this commitment to improve the lives of care-experienced young people in Scotland, to keep the promise, and I pledge to do that if I am elected as First Minister. And I also pledge to work in the way that Nicola Sturgeon, and if I may say so, Liz Smith, in her speech to Parliament just the other day, said about that collective endeavour. Because surely, and, Presiding Officer, your leadership of the bill that we have wrestled with over the last week has been, as Nicola Sturgeon said, a demonstration that it is possible for us to have courteous and respectful debate in wrestling with big questions. And there can be no bigger question than making sure that the future of young people in our country is the best it possibly can be. And if I am fortunate enough to lead a government, I will work with others to make sure we fulfil that promise.